Welcome to the Naturally Ecstatic Podcast. I'm Pete Warnock, a breathwork, embodiment and meditation teacher, and I'm a curious explorer of whatever it means to be fully alive. This podcast is a space where we can dive deeply into the art of living naturally, joyfully, and living life on purpose, exploring techniques from the way in which we breathe, to the way in which we move, to how we care for our body, our emotions, our mind, and our spirit. I'm going to share with you methods and concepts that you can use to explore breathwork, nervous system regulation, emotional alchemy, and the power of aligned intention. All of this alongside topics close to my heart, like ecstatic dance, the power of singing, managing chronic pain and depression. I'll also be talking about the life hacks that I use for living a naturally ecstatic life. I'll also be sharing conversations with other inspirational people living their version of a naturally ecstatic life. And whether you're here to upgrade your health, find more presence, reconnect with your natural state of aliveness, or you just want some light entertainment and a different perspective, then you're in the right place. And on this first episode of Naturally Ecstatic, I'm joined by my dear friend Clara Apollo, a natural energy healer, Qigong teacher, and the host of award-winning podcast series, Qi Time. Hey Clara.
Hey Pete, this is your first podcast episode.
Yeah.
So what is your podcast called?
Naturally Ecstatic.
Why is it called that?
Because just beneath the busyness, we are all naturally ecstatic.
Wow, that is quite a statement.
It's true. When we just dip beneath all of the busyness and all of the thoughts and all of the craziness and all of the everything that takes up our attention, when we put our attention into our deeper self, into quietness, into peace, into curiosity of being, then we come alive. We notice that we're already incredibly alive. And when we're in this state, we can tap into our natural pharmacy. You know, all of the drugs that we ever need are inside of ourselves. And we can learn to start tapping into this and utilizing this to bring about more well-being, bring about more happiness, to bring about more natural ecstasy.
Well, what has taken you so long to get here? Because this is such an important topic. What is inside of you to be able to access? So what is this podcast about for people then? Having given that amazing statement about what you can do, how are you hoping to share with people what tools, techniques, what have you got to share here with people around that topic?
First of all, I want to open up some conversations, and maybe bust some myths, and just share information. Yes, there will be tools and techniques and all sorts of things, but it's really initially talking into what is possible, and through exploring what is possible, then starting to dip into the hows. How do we do this? How do we access these deeper levels of awareness, these deeper levels of energy, these deeper levels of consciousness?
Yeah, and it's, we talk about these things, but you're very much into the embodiment of it. You're actually experiencing things for yourself. And as lovely as you're speaking about it, because it helps our mind to get focused and concentrated, what we really want to do is have an experience, because then that's yours. And so I'm really curious, how did you first get into breath work? How did that happen for
before
you?
I step into that, I want to say something that one of my first teachers used to say: knowledge is the booby prize. Knowledge is a booby prize. We can know everything, we can understand everything, but unless it's a living experience, a direct embodied experience, it's useless.
Beautiful.
It doesn't help us at all. So.
And there's so much of that in this day and age, isn't there? There's feeding the mind with information, and yet if you're not embodying it, it doesn't go deep, does it? It doesn't actually.
I call it shelf development.
Shelf
development. It's we've all got the books, and we can read it and read it and read it, but actually, are we living it? And this is what the whole Naturally Ecstatic way is about. It's about living in a state of presence. When it boils down to it, it's all about presence.
So that's present moment, and people are here listening in their present moment. So welcome to the Naturally Ecstatic Podcast, eh?
Yeah, and I'm not talking to your mind. I'm talking to you as presence, because we are all presence. Yeah. We might identify with ourselves as our name and our job and our whatever we are and whatever we think. And they're all constructs in the mind. They're all part of the egoic structure. And we can drop deeper and deeper and deeper and start to experience deeper facets of our soul, deeper facets of our consciousness. And in those places, we're completely free. We're pain-free, we're free from suffering, and we're in our natural ecstasy.
This is beautiful, by the way. I can feel it. I can feel that you've just taken us into that still point of being. And this word ecstasy, I think, can be misinterpreted as something like orgasmic and like the ultimate ecstasy, but that I felt in that moment felt expansive, and that was, so there are different forms of ecstasy then?
I think ecstasy is something that is kind of, because of the drug, people perceive it as a big up and out.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, it's a really deep in experience. So it's a deeply present experience. It's where I am in utter rapture of being this
miracle.
Yeah, this miracle. Being. And it is this miracle of being, that is showing up moment to moment.
And we are all magical miracles of being, and we forget about this. Again, maybe the mind overloads with, you've got to know this, that, and the other, but this truth that just lands with that statement, you're a miracle of being. You kind of own your own presence then, don't you?
Yeah, and we're just happening in this moment. It's quite incredible, actually. Even though we see this timeline of being born and dying, but actually we can only ever change anything now. We can only ever experience anything now. So we're literally on the cutting edge of consciousness. Unless we filter everything through our past and we project our past into our future, and then we live in this perception of the past and a future, rather than actually being really fully surrendered and in awe of what is showing up right now.
And when did presence like this first land for you in your life? Did you grow into it? Was it a sharp awareness, or what happened?
I've always known this. I've always known this presence. And there were times in my life when I kind of lost sight of it. Mostly through physical pain, sometimes through emotional pain. And then there were times when the remembrance became so incredibly strong that it was just undeniable. Yeah.
So it's that remember who you really are.
Yeah, but people get caught up in that because it's not a who. We're not a who. We are a happening. We are. People talk about beings, and I am a human being, but I am a human. Yes, being. I am being, not a being. I am being. Being is a verb. It is a happening. It's not a doing. Well, even though a verb kind of is like a doing, but it's a kind of, I don't really know how to describe it really, but it's a happening. Yeah,
because we are using words here.
Yeah.
For a feeling and a sense of other and awe and more, and the words get a bit clunky, don't they?
It does, and especially when we drop into this space of presence where suddenly we become vast. For me, my awareness, when I bring my awareness deeply in, then I tap into what seems like endlessness, what seems like expansiveness, to as far as I can feel out, as far as it goes. And that feels like it's going in. And yet I put my awareness outside of myself and I can feel spaciousness eternally beyond as well. And then when I try and kind of bring the awareness to where is one spaciousness ending and one spaciousness beginning, the internal and the external, there is no boundary. There is just this expansiveness that I am.
So throughout your life, have you been growing into this? So you say you're always aware of presence. So as a child, aware of presence, and
when I was a child, I was in a continual state of wonder. I would climb things. I was utterly fascinated with life. I would sit and sing and play on my own and play with my brothers, and yeah, it was incredible. And then pain came into my life early on. Around the age of 5, I fell out of a tree and was impaled up through my perineum, up into my abdomen. And basically, I stopped breathing. I had to stop breathing because every time I breathed, there was such excruciating pain in my groin, and so I held my breath and passed out. And a friend found me and took me to my parents, who took me to hospital and got stitched up and all this kind of stuff. But that brought my awareness to, for one, the movement of my diaphragm, because I noticed in that time when I was recovering that every time I breathed, there was incredible pain. And every time I breathed, there was a pressure into my pelvic floor, what I now know is my pelvic floor. And so I learned the relationship between my breathing diaphragm and my pelvic floor very, very early on. And I actually learned to breathe in a way that I learned to breathe incredibly laterally, rather than using my diaphragm. So I would breathe into the upper part of my lungs and hardly move my diaphragm at all, which then I had to sort of unlearn. So
wow, that's a very traumatic experience to have at the age of 5.
And I had lots of injuries around that time. So I was circumcised as well. Not an injury, but yeah, traumatic. It's amazing what goes through one's mind around these kind of things. Why I was being punished. It felt like I was being punished. Why I'd been made wrong and I needed to be amended. And around this time of being circumcised, falling out of the tree, I had another injury swinging out of a tree. We had this incredible big tree on our wreck, and big rope out of it. And we used to jump out of the tree, hold onto the rope, and just swing right the way across the wreck, and just hold on and wiggle our legs out, and it was almost like flying. And one day I jumped and I slid down the rope a little bit. And as I slid down the rope, when I came to hit past the ground, my knees hit the ground and my back buckled, and I very nearly broke my back. And since that day, I've been in chronic pain. So that set off a whole bunch of issues with my back, which have never been managed to be healed for whatever reason. But what that did was that brought me into changing my relationship with sensation and pain. So I went from being an ecstatic being into a being where what I became aware of was pain and suffering. And I built lots of stories in my mind around that, the whats and the whys and the hows. And then over my life, I had to basically learn how to be with pain. And so I learned to use my breathing, and I learned to use my awareness to actually transform my relationship with pain. The sensations are still here, but I don't suffer with it anywhere near as much as I used to.
Wow, some very, very keys coming here to shift your relationship with pain.
Mm.
Was this kind of, did you realize you had to do something, and you were the doctors helping, and you're just like, not sure? Or how did this come about, this you using your breath and your awareness to manage pain?
The doctors didn't really help at all. I saw an osteopath who was a spiritual healer. My osteopath was one of the head of the White Brotherhood or something like that. And he would take me to his meetings at the White Eagle Lodge. That's what it was. And he would take me, and people would do laying on of hands and all sorts of things like this. I was young, I was 5, 7, 9, all the way through pretty much. And he was quite incredible, and he kind of planted little seeds of awakening in me as far as how to meet pain, what to do with it, how to focus on it a different way. And I also had a neighbor who was my violin teacher, who was about 95, Colin Beckett, amazing old guy, wonderful violinist, and he was a hypnotist. And he was such a good hypnotist. He could just look at you and click his fingers, and you would go into trance. I mean, proper somnambulistic. And he did this a couple of times with me. I asked him to help me with a couple of things, and he just lifted his hands up, moved his hands towards me a couple of times, and I came round an hour later. And I believe that there are things that he said in there which helped me to start to come to terms and meet pain in a different way. And what I learned was, when we perceive pain, or when I perceive pain, my mind goes to the general area of the pain. So if I were to put my awareness on my so-called pain now, I can feel a sharp stabbing pain in my sacroiliac, in my back. I can feel what would be seen as referred pain down my leg, up into my back, through into my stomach, and a whole bunch of different sensations in there. Now, my mind reads all of these sensations as pain. So if I were to use my everyday experience and my everyday perception, I would say I'm in pain from my knee up to my shoulder, all on the right hand side. When I focus clearly on it with fascination and curiosity, which is utterly the key for me, then I notice there are points of pain, and there are lots of areas of general sensation. And the general sensation, when I focus in on them, there can be a little bit of tingling, there can be a little bit of warmth, there's a little bit of tension, there's a little bit of all sorts of different sensations, and they're all coming in and out of experience all at the same time, in and out of time. There's no one particular sensation that continues apart from a sharp pain through my sacroiliac joint. And even when I focus on that sharp pain, it has qualities of heat, of cold, all sorts of different sensations that I can take pleasure from, actually. So the actual pieces of pain are minute compared to all of the other sensation that my mind would say is pain. And so I focus on allowing all of these other sensations and enjoying all of these other sensations. How can I come into a deeper relationship with enjoying all of these other sensations? And it's a moment to moment practice, and it's something that some days I'm better at it than others. But it means that I'm not in this huge state of suffering all the time. And my perception of suffering is probably different to others as well. What I've noticed in myself is, if I welcome the sensations in my body and become curious with them and relax with them, then yes, the painful ones, the sharp ones, the ones that I find really hard to relax with, they cause a tension in me. But if I relax enough with them and just let them be there and don't oppose them, then I don't really suffer. When I'm in opposition to them, when I'm rejecting the sensations, then I've really come into a state of suffering. So my experience of suffering is when I am in opposition to what is, and when I'm in acceptance and welcoming what is, then I drop into a deeper state of grace with it. So a deeper state of awareness of what I call my yes. Yeah.
I just love how you have just transformed the approach to managing pain by feeling into the different sensations within pain. Because pain is one word again.
Yeah, it's one word that encapsulates a vast array of everything, you know. So,
but as you're looking at the heat and the cold and the tension, whatever, you're almost giving space for the pain to sort of dissipate, or not. If you, my sense is, I'm sitting here with my own kind of back pain, nothing like what you're going through, but it enabled me to notice the qualities within there that actually aren't pain. And I think I've never thought of it like that before.
Yeah, and curiosity is the key for it.
And it gives more space, which allows more energy and blood supply to help to move on anything that's ready to move on. But to, as you were saying earlier about being in this presence piece, to presence the difficulties, the painful pieces in this moment, still remember that you're a miraculous being and you're able to perceive these qualities within you.
And within noticing all of these qualities that are coming and going, most of the time they're coming and going, and to see that they're impermanent, you know, and to see that they just appear and disappear in milliseconds. They come and go, come and go, come and go, and there's billions of these things happening all through my awareness, you know, and we all experience so many different feelings all of the time. And this is just me bringing curiosity and a welcome to what is alive in this body right now. And sometimes it's easier for me and sometimes it's not.
Of course.
You know?
So were these injuries a road into your curiosity about breath work?
Yeah, they were. I mean, myself and my brothers used to play around with our breathing a lot. We would do fast breathing to get really high and pass out. Actually, we would do funny breathing exercises to be able to hold our breath under the bath water and stuff like that. And so we were always messing around with all sorts of different things. We were a curious bunch, for sure.
That feels more like breath play.
It is. Well, I personally think that breathwork is breath play. You know, when we put the word work in front of anything, it fucking makes it hard work. You know, and as you come to know me through this podcast, you will know that I swear, and that you will know that also I have quite a rude sense of humour and all sorts of things like that. And but I see that there's holiness in everything, you know. But the word work, my God, it needs to be tipped up on side of its head, you know. Breath work is not about work. It is about being utterly curious with what is happening with your breath and what happens when I do this. What happens when I do this? There's so many different schools of breath work that say you should do this and you shouldn't do this. But breathing in any particular way just has a different outcome. You know, when you get savvy to what the outcomes are, you can be much more skillful with what breathing you need for what situations. And that's what I've played through with my life. I've used so many different breathing tools and breathing experiments, as I see them, to learn to access different states within me.
So is that what this podcast is about? To invite the listener to be more sort of freer to explore with curiosity how their breath process is for them?
Yeah, yeah, because I definitely think that we're all completely different, even though we're all very similar, but different tools work for different people. Different people have a very different mental emotional makeup, different resistances to different things, and different types of body, and we have to find what works for us, and I like to talk about what works for me because I'm the only authority on me that there is. I'm not going to have someone say, no, this don't do this because this does this in your body. I need to check it out in my body first. I spent years and years reading all sorts of self-help books and things, being told what things work and what things don't. And through practicing them, I found that half of it was complete nonsense for me. Not necessarily for other people, but for me, they didn't work. And so I've had to discover what works for me. And I want people to have the skill and the tools to be able to work out what works for them.
So how can people find out more about you? Where can they go?
I've got a very small YouTube channel that's starting to grow.
We'd love you to subscribe.
And we would love you to subscribe. I've got Instagram. Again, I don't use it very much. I'm not a fan of these social things. What I love is actually being in the room with people. But I have a website, naturallyecstatic.com, naturally-ecstatic.com. And all of my socials are just at Naturally Ecstatic, all one word. And what I love to do is take people on journeys and to help educate people and give them tools which will help them in their everyday life. And I work within breath or play within breath, on a vast spectrum of breath. I've explored breathwork in most of its styles and have cherry picked the bits that work for me. I love changing state. I love being able to change my breath to change my state. It's been known forever that when we when we go into any kind of emotional or mental response, our breathing changes. And now it's seen that conversely, when we change our breath, our mental emotional state changes. And so I'm really, really into helping people to change their state, master their state, so that they can master their life, because life is bombarding us at the moment. We are so stretched, we are so busy, and we need simple tools that we can use that work right now. And this is what my mission is, to give as many people as many tools as they can, so we can all wake the fuck up to the fact that we are already free inside, and we just have to go a little bit below the busyness of our mind to drop into our naturally ecstatic nature.
And you've shared your tools and techniques with thousands of people over how many years now? So it's not just you that these are helping.
Yeah, I mean, part of my life, I actually had a nervous breakdown when I was in my 20s, and I'd had quite an emotionally charged sexual life through my life. I felt, because of being circumcised and then all sorts of other issues, I was absolutely petrified of the opposite sex, and had premature ejaculation and was really terrified of having any intimacy with people. And I was a glass blower, which again used the breath to its finest degrees. I was a scientific glass blower for 7 years. And then when the recession hit in 92, I was made redundant, and I discovered that actually my apprenticeship didn't stand up, so I wasn't actually qualified. I lost my house and had to move back to my parents, and I had a nervous breakdown. And in order to deal with that, one of my best friends, or my best friend, who's no longer with us, she invited me to go to a meditation class with her. And after 2 sessions of meditation and starting to do the practice myself, I suddenly realized that I lost sight of what I knew before. Just doing these small meditations dropped me back into presence, dropped me back into my natural state. And literally within a few weeks, I'd come off my medication, and just had a whole new lease of life. And I was just like, this stuff is so amazing. I want the world to know. And so I trained in all sorts of different touch modalities, massage, aromatherapy, Reiki, meditation, and breathwork. And then just wanted to share that with the world. And that's what I've been doing ever since. My dream is to get everybody to wake up to the fact that everything we need is inside. Everything we need is inside, and it's not so far away from where we think it is.
And so you have some free resources for people, don't you, to be able to try some of these.
Yep, I've got on my website. If you go onto my website, then there is a freebie that you can download, which is about changing your state. So a very, very simple exercise on how to change your state at will. And when you do that, you come into my network, and then you can access all of my other freebies and all sorts of things. So, yeah.
Can't wait. So how do you see this podcast series continuing? What are your plans to continue with this?
Well, I've got lots of different ideas around it, so going into lots of different topics, some around breathwork, some around just natural ecstasy. There are so many ways, there are so many modalities that teach kind of similar things, and that come from a slightly different angle. So I want to talk to yoga practitioners, I want to talk to breathwork practitioners, ecstatic dance teachers. I want to talk to all sorts of people in all sorts of different things. I mean, I ran a choir for several years, and the choir was called Succulent Hum because it was purely about, singing is breathing. At the end of the day, we're doing really long breaths, and we're pushing it up through our voice box, but it's still a really long exhalation. So it turns us into our deeper rest and heal mode. And I want to look at all sorts of different topics and modalities that bring us back home. And some of them will be purely me talking, and some of them will be inviting experts in their field. And that's the way that I see this podcast is going to go. Yeah, so thank you for listening to this first episode, and I really hope that you follow me and you stay in to listen to more, because I've got loads of things to talk about, and I think that you're going to really like a lot of it.